Before I delve into the show, I just want to make a quick point here in regards to sports. A lot of times the way you're able to adapt in your environment, whether it be as a coach or a player, really determines your age in that sport. And, I know a lot of people are probably hearing that thinking, no, like obviously your birth year determines your age, that's how it works. And really what I mean is, though, you look at two really successful people in football. One is Nick Saban and the other is Tom Brady. Tom Brady has adapted, he's grown, he's changed his game over the years. He was this big arm, deep ball guy, and now, he gets the ball out in, under 2 seconds. He makes short, intermediate throws, and he's changed his diet, and he's changed his workout habits, and it's really reflected. He's older now, obviously. He has less physical abilities than what he used to. And in order to play longer and have a longer, more successful career, he's changed his diet, he's changed his playing style, the way he prepares for games, and, how he reads defenses pre-snap. And, in Nick Saban, it's another really successful guy. And what it is, he is a very stern, he's a very rigid person. And sure, he's had success, but the thing is, Nick Saban is no longer now going to change for anybody. They're both definitely in the back nine of their careers, but when you really consider this whole adaptation, you could see Tom Brady playing 5-6 more years of high-level football before you could see Nick Saban going to a different program and bringing them up from the ashes to what he's done with Alabama. And that's just really what I mean right there. You can see that more of Tom Brady because he's evolved and grown with the game, whereas Nick Saban is not. Both successful, just one's adapted and one really hasn't. So this week, we're going to talk about two different kinds of voting in sports. We're going to talk about the MVP voting in the NFL and the NBA, and then we're going to talk about Hall of Fame voting in general. With Hall of Fame voting, I was thinking about doing it sport by sport, but really as I went through it more and more, I really just started to notice I would say the same thing for all three sports, baseball, football, and basketball. So I'm going to go ahead and just stick with Hall of Fame voting in general. And, with the MVP voting in the NFL, it's two things, and the first one here, it's fairly consistent. You have to be a quarterback on a playoff team. That's almost a given 99% of the time. And that's also where it's kind of misguided too, though. Last year, going through, I guess, maybe 10, 11, 12 games of the season, Carson Wentz was by far everybody's MVP. He had outperformed expectations. The Eagles were humming on all cylinders. And you really think, though, was he valuable, though? Was he that valuable? Because after he left, Nick Foles went and carried them on through the playoffs and won a Super Bowl, had an amazing Super Bowl game. Then Aaron Rodgers gets hurt, so he wasn't in contention. Brady wound up winning the Super Bowl because he was the best quarterback on a playoff team. And that kind of fits the mold, It's just, who is the best quarterback on a playoff team? And in my eyes, he kind of won it by default. You look at somebody who really adds value to a team from last year in the NFL, and that was really Todd Gurley. He generates offense not just in rushing the ball, which he was very effective at, but he also does it in receiving yards as well. He helps Jared Goff open up things, whether it be less guys in the box, more guys in the box to throw it downfield. Helps Sean McVay. We all know that Sean McVay is a brilliant offensive-minded coach, but the thing is, it's a lot easier to be a world-class coach when you have a world-class player. Look at Tim Duncan and Greg Popovich, look at Phil Jackson and Michael Jordan. But Todd Gurley, last year with his stats, he had 13 rushing touchdowns, 1,300 rushing yards, 6 receiving TDs, almost 800 rushing yards, had 64 receptions. You take him out of that offense is not the same. There's a thing I like to do. It's kind of like a reality check almost, and what it's really called is the say it out loud test. You say something out loud, and if it makes sense to you when you say it out loud, real specifically and plainly, that's a really good measure. And let's just go ahead and say this out loud. If you're thinking that, Sean McVay is what's really carrying the Rams last year, or even this year maybe, and it's not Todd Gurley, let's go ahead and say this out loud. Their offense would just be just as explosive, just as dynamic, and this running back I'm about to name would put up just as many yards. that guy's Jerick McKinnon. Let's go ahead and say that. The Rams' offense is just as explosive with Jerick McKinnon starting at running back. I don't think that's the case. Jerick McKinnon's a starting running back in the NFL before he got hurt. He's a good pass-catching back. He is not going to put up Todd Gurley numbers, and that offense is not going to be humming like it is right now. We're looking at the best running back in the league, and he is definitely, from last year at least, the MVP. He really opened things up and saved a lot of plays, possessions, everything for the Rams. But I'm not going to stick on that too much longer. Let's go ahead and switch over to the NBA here. I said that the NFL MVP voting was consistent but misguided. So it's kind of reliable but not valid. You're going to get the same answer. You're looking at the same thing, but it doesn't really assess value. In the NBA, we all just know the NBA voting is complete bullshit. Look at the last few guys who won. On Hump Day Hoops Hysteria, I talked at length about James Harden and LeBron James, and James Harden. I made it clear on the Hump Day Hoops Hysteria show that James Harden, the only statistical category he beat him in at all was he averaged 3 more points per game, and that's it. That's the only thing. And then you look at the year before that, sure, Russell Westbrook averaged a triple-double, but you look at it again from last year, he had more triple-doubles than anybody, almost averaged triple-double again, doesn't get MVP votes. Are you just going to gloss over that and pretend that didn't happen now? And then Steph Curry was a transcendent shooter who won back-to-back MVPs, and all these guys. If you were going to rent one player from one season and add him onto your team, it's going to be LeBron James. And this point is really kind of buoyed by the GM survey that gets done at the beginning of the year. It just recently got done this week, and I'll say this: when you're doing an evaluation of your boss at your job, you're a lot more likely to be honest if the evaluation or survey is done anonymously compared to if you have to have your name attached to it. And GMs all across the league the past 2 or 3 years, each year vote LeBron as their MVP. They want LeBron. They would take LeBron on their team. They vote him as the MVP. They don't vote Harden. They don't vote Westbrook. They don't vote Curry or Durant or any of these other guys. Every year, the past few years, it's been LeBron. And it's really... The MVP voting is done by the writers, and I think they get swayed. The writers get swayed by it's like a popularity contest almost. It's like a shiny new toy effect, the Sports Center highlight effect. They see James Harden making plays. They see Steph Curry shooting these 30-footers and making them, And, I'm not going to say that there aren't highlights of LeBron James doing spectacular things, but it's really like a greatness fatigue. You've just seen it so often that you just expect it now, even though it's year 16. Look at guys that were all-stars that came in with LeBron. Dwayne Wade on his last leg about to retire. Melo on his last leg about to retire. Chris Bosh has some unforeseen health issues, but he's no longer in the league. You're looking at top guys that he played with, and he's outlasted all of them. He's outlasted Derrick Rose even, and Derrick Rose came in much later than LeBron. And I really think that it's not as shiny and flashy to vote for LeBron anymore compared to some of these newer guys. So I think that's really what it boils down to as far as voting in the NBA. It's complete bullshit. There's no really rhyme or reason to it. Like I said with the NFL, you have this consistent outcome, but doesn't really assess value. You can give them credit for at least assessing it consistently. They might consistently mess up, but they're at least consistent with their approach. With the NBA, they're just looking at the hottest, newest thing, like, yep, that's valuable. No, it's really not. It doesn't assess value. Let's move on to Hall of Fame voting. I made a point that when I was talking about the Hall of Fame voting I was going to talk about it in each sport, and what I realized, though, is that I was discussing the same thing for each respective professional sport, and so I'm just going to talk about the Hall of Fame voting in a general sense here. And really, in my opinion, I do believe that players in the Hall of Fame should be the only ones voting on who makes it into the Hall of Fame. Or, you got coaches and all these other guys in the Hall of Fame, but I believe Hall of Fame members for their respective sports are the ones who should be making the vote, casting who gets into the Hall of Fame. And really, I was talking about this with Drake. There are enough living Hall of Fame members where you can get a pretty good tally and a pretty good sense of who should be voted in and who shouldn't be. And before I go on into the writers a little bit, it seems like the players would vote you in on your merit, Whereas some guys like Terrell Owens, and I'm not going to go all through the list, but there are some guys who were forced to wait who are really first ballot Hall of Famers. And you could make the argument that it was really just how they treated the media. Maybe they didn't get along with the media or see the purpose in, giving them a soundbite or a story all the time. The media and the writers, they take that into consideration when voting for players. And really, when you look at Hall of Fame, like sure there are Hall of Fame guys, like he has he's a stand-up guy, that kind of thing. That's great, and that can influence whether you get in. But ultimately, I think those Hall of Fame members or players, coaches, whoever it may be, they're going to value and understand what you do in between the lines better than what the writers do. And so I'll go ahead and continue on that note with the Hall of Fame players, In the NBA and the NFL, I know for sure, it's viewed as a fraternity. They understand, everybody understands the level of commitment, dedication, talent, skill that you have to make it and play in that league. You are at the highest level. It doesn't matter if you're the 15th man on the bench or, you come off the bench and you're a role player. Like, you didn't get to the NBA by being sorry, You are a really top-notch player. There are only like 450 to like 500 spots available to play in the NBA. That's like the most secluded private league there is. I mean, getting a spot in that league is really saying something, and that goes for all professional sports. And players really respect and understand the dedication and skill that it takes, whereas writers, typically they're not always playing in the NFL or in professional sports. Like, you get some guys who retire and go become an analyst for ESPN or Fox Sports or something like that. But typically, a writer isn't going to be able to truly understand and appreciate the amount of skill and practice and effort that it takes to make it as a Hall of Fame player. Whereas I feel like people who are already in the Hall of Fame, those Hall of Fame members, those players, those coaches, they understand it. They lived it. They saw it every day. Let's just hop over to the writers here real quick. And then again, this is all for respective Hall of Fame halls in regards to their sports. Writers, they're really guys who probably never were that good, never really made it as far as playing. I mean, some guys, you got Doug Gottlieb, who was a college basketball player, sure, but you got guys like Skip Bayless. He averaged like 1.3 or 1.2 points per game his senior year in high school, but you want to find the biggest critic of LeBron James, and it's Skip Bayless. It's the guy who literally averaged barely over a point per game his senior year, and now it's like you're going to tell the world why LeBron James isn't good at basketball. Like, in my opinion, that just kind of, is invalidating for Skip Bayless. But it's guys who never really played or were good at the sport wanting their voice. They're wanting their Me Too moment. They're wanting to be included, In their eyes, being able to decide who gets into the Hall of Fame, being able to vote on it, saying that your voice matters, your opinion matters, it validates their writers and authors themselves, saying like, oh, hey, I do know the sport. Like, I vote on the Hall of Fame. I decide who gets in. And it goes for the MVP voting too, You look at guys who feel validated, falsely invalidated, put up on a pedestal falsely because they had this kind of vote, they had this kind of say-so. And I'll tell you what, if the writers obviously are not a fan of players voting for MVP, voting for Hall of Fame, because if you're not even voting, like, what's the point? If the players decide who their MVP is, the players decide who gets into their own Hall of Fame, those writers are going to feel marginalized. They're going to feel left out. You can see this the way with the Players Tribune and Uninterrupted. These are players, and even NBA players now are having podcasts and other forms of media outlet. You're looking at guys who are taking control of their own narrative. They're cutting out the middleman, so to speak. Like in the equation of NBA player and fans, they're able to skip the media as far as their outlet to get things out. They can take their own platform, whether it be social media, the Players Tribune, Uninterrupted, their own personal podcast. You're looking at all these ways that players can, jump over the media, take the narratives themselves, control it themselves, and you can definitely sense that, writers, media members, ESPN, whatever the case may be, they definitely feel marginalized and left out by that. And if they don't have their Hall of Fame voting, what do we need them for? I can scroll through my Instagram and Twitter account, read what's happening, read a box score, make my own assumption or understanding of a player, or I can just look at and see what LeBron James is doing or tweeting. And this thing with Steph Curry, Tom Brady, whoever, I can just go and look myself, and it's like I can form my own opinion off that. I don't need to tune into the sports column of a paper and check a box score and see what whoever from Joe Schmo, the paper company, wants to tell me. I can do all this on my own. Those players can let all that information out on their own. And like I said, I was talking to Drake about this. A really good analogy I didn't think of, and he brought it up to me. Imagine going and applying for a job, and they say, okay, we like you on paper, we want to interview you, see if you pass the eyeball test. You come in for the interview, and you're being interviewed by somebody who has nothing to do with that company. Now, that seems a little off-putting, right? Same thing with the Hall of Fame. Like, you're going to be voted on whether you get in or not by a guy who literally could be Skip Bayless and be absolute garbage at that sport. You could be looking at a guy who was a third-string quarterback who made it onto his high school football team because his high school football team didn't cut any players and he just had to have a position given to him, That doesn't seem right. Like, if I go on and apply for a job as a doctor somewhere and then I get interviewed by an electrician or a plumber, like, how does that sit with you? As an employee, a potential employee in viewing that organization or company, even that just wouldn't sit well with me. And you got to think it's the same way for these players too, who go out and compete, practice, train, like I said, and then the next thing you know, they're being interviewed by some guy or they're being decided on whether they get in or out by somebody who didn't play the sport. It just doesn't sit well, and I think saying it out loud like that, really can provide some clarity on it. It's called the Say It Out Loud test. I do it with a lot of things, It's a good way of assessing. It's like a reality check, It's like, does that really make sense? Do I really want to do that? Do I really want to follow through with this? Does this person really believe that? Let me say it out loud to see kind of how that sense is. So that really kind of puts the bow on the package here. It ties the bow, whatever the analogy is, as far as voting for the MVP and Hall of Fame writers. I am a fan of players voting for the MVP in the NFL and NBA too. I think there's only one stipulation, that you can't vote for yourself, or maybe you can even expand it to somebody else on your team. But ultimately, just let the players decide, and the coaches, they know better than anybody. They're around those guys. They compete against those guys. They know what it takes to get to that level. Let them decide. Let them vote on it, So that's how I kind of fall in the situation. Next week I'm going to talk about why people, really love the Bulls, and even now they love the Bulls, talking about them, your Bulls with Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, and why people are hating on the Warriors now and kind of what they built. And we'll talk about some differences and some similarities there. So I think I actually forgot to say this on the introduction for the show, but I'll go ahead and say it now. Tune into the Mothership Show on Mondays, Knuckle Sandwich every Thursday, Fantasy 15 every Friday. Again, really listen to that show. I'm listening in every week. Anything fantasy football and anything betting football right now, I'm really trying to get my hands on. So definitely tune into the Fantasy 15. And lastly, tune in to Ducks on the Pond every Sunday. We're in baseball season's postseason now, so I know things are going to get juicy. Just listen to all the shows, and as always, stay saucy.